Hello, hi, welcome once again to M5's English language learning program, Let's Speak English. I'm Gav Duncan and I'm here on your TV to help you learn English. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Yes? Good. And are you ready for today's lesson? Yes? Good. Okay, well, let's learn English together. And hello again, people. Welcome back. Welcome to Wednesday. Don't look up. Yes, one thing we have to remember today. It's Wednesday, so we can't look up. For one thing, it's the summer. And that means that our colossal problem, Colossus, will probably be wearing less clothes than usual. And because he's an ancient Greek, he'll probably be wearing some sort of toga. And so, well, let's just say that we don't want to look up. So, don't cast your eyes to the skies. Not today. Today, as usual, keep your peepers fixed on the horizon. I know, and you know, that we're not going to be able to see Friday. Not from this distance. And the Hubbles, Clive and Trudy, still haven't returned my calls. I might try again later today, but because they haven't returned my calls, I don't think the chances of us borrowing their telescope are very good. Probably less than 1 million to 1, I reckon. So we'll just have to rely on the naked eye. So keep looking forwards. Forwards, not backwards, and definitely not upwards. All right, people. The present perfect, the tense which connects the past and the present. And did you notice the sentence about the Hubbles? They still haven't returned my calls. That's a sentence in the present perfect, isn't it? Yes! And why did I use the present perfect for that sentence? Yes, it's because I'm talking about a state, a situation which started in the past and continues to the present. It's the same idea as the sentences we saw yesterday, the ones we made using for and since. Okay, so, for and since, the two words which tend to cause, as Kovrig Benser always says, a maelstrom of chaos. Now, there's no really good reason for this confusion, but as I mentioned, these two words do tend to cause problems. Okay, so let's have a look at them again, but before we do that, what about the verb to tend? We've seen it before, but have we discussed it? The verb to tend means that something regularly behaves in a certain way. Not 100% of the time, no. If something happens 100% of the time, then it's a fact, and we've used the present simple to say what that thing does. Here, with the verb to tend, we're talking about something which happens regularly. We can say, for example, that Hungarian women tend to be attractive. Not every Hungarian woman is attractive, but it's something we can see regularly. Think about pygmies. You know, those people who aren't very tall. We could say that pygmies tend to be short, but that doesn't mean that we don't get tall pygmies every now and then. But I suppose that when the tourists come, then the tall pygmies have to hide. I don't know. So that's the idea of tend. Something happens regularly, but not all the time. If we were thinking about language, we could say that written English tends to be more formal than spoken English. But again, it tends to be this way, but that's not a guarantee. Think about two different types of written English. Think about two types of newspaper, for example. If we're reading a broadsheet, then we expect the language to be more formal and also grammatically correct. If, on the other hand, we're reading a tabloid newspaper, then we don't expect the language to be formal or grammatically correct. They're both written English, but one of them tends to be formal and the other tends to be informal. Very, very informal. So, as you can see from that, we normally expect broadsheet newspapers to be more formal with their written English, but it's not a cast iron guarantee. Still, I suppose there's more of a guarantee with tabloid newspapers. They're not very likely to print formal language. And, well, while we're here, let's just check that we know why these two types of newspaper are called different names. We know that both of these items belong to a single group, don't we? Yes, of course we do. They're newspapers, okay. But with the group of newspapers, we have several subgroups. Okay. So, what's a subgroup when it's at home? Well, the prefix sub, and yes, it's a prefix. And what does this mean? Well, it means that we add this trio of letters to the front of a word to change the meaning of that word. Think about the prefixes we know. We know anti, and we know about antibacterial things and anti-mosquito spray. We know pre, and we know about pre-adolescents, children who are still children, children who haven't started turning into adults. We know the prefix post as well, don't we? Yes, we know about posthumous awards, things that people get after they die. We know about post-operative care, which is the care you get after you come out of hospital, after an operation. Okay, and now we're meeting sub. Now the easiest way for us to understand this prefix is to look at a picture. Look at this picture and tell me what you see. So, what can you see? What? Who? Are you sure? Yes? Blimey. Ah, sorry, there must have been a mix-up. Hang on a minute. This is the right picture. All right, so what can you see in that picture? Yes, that's right. It's a sort of boat, isn't it? Yes. But what's his name? What do we call this thing, this sort of boat? That's the important thing, because the name tells us exactly what this boat does. Okay, time for Hangman. All right, so yes, that's the word I was looking for. The name of this type of boat is a submarine. And the name tells us exactly what it does. Okay, so what does marine mean? Any ideas? Think about it. I'm sure you've heard this word a lot. Marine plants, marine biology, marine life. What about the color aquamarine? What's the connection? Yes, all of these words, all of the words connected to marine are connected to the sea. They all come from the Latin word mare and marinus, which changed into marin and marine in French, and then the English decided it was a good word, so they adopted it too. So, marine plants, plants which live in the sea. Marine biology, the study of animals which live in the sea. Marine life, all the living things in the sea. Aquamarine, a colour which comes from the colour of seawater. Okay. So we know part of the word, marine, which means seawater. And what about the first three letters? Well, those three letters are S-U-B, sub, submarine. Okay, so what does that tell us? What does that tell us about the prefix sub? Where does this boat spend most of its time? Yes, that's right, underwater. Marine means seawater, so sub, logically, must mean what? Exactly. Sub means under or underneath, and that's what this boat is designed for, isn't it? This boat, this submarine, is designed to travel underwater, remain underwater. Its main purpose is to be underwater. Okay, all right, so we know what a submarine is. And of course, we all remember the famous film about a German submarine, don't we? Which one am I talking about? Das Boot! Possibly the most boring film ever produced. Still, apparently it's very boring being on a submarine, so at least it's accurate. Still, there was that hit single by U96. That was boring too, but that wasn't very long. Anyway, the point is that the German word for submarine is U-boot, or as the English say, U-boat. Okay, and what does the U stand for? Yes, that's right. U stands for Untersee, under the sea, submarine. The word is the same in both languages. Unterseeboot, submarine, they mean the same thing. All right, and that brings us back to sub. I was talking about a subgroup, wasn't I? Okay, now we all know what a group is, don't we? Yes, of course we do. A group is a number of things that we put together, things which we classify or class together. All of the things in a group are the same or similar. When we go to the supermarket, things are grouped together to make it simpler for us to do our shopping. The cheese is grouped together, the meat is grouped together, the dairy products are grouped together, the fruit and vegetables are grouped together. And when we get to, say, the meat counter, then we see that there are subgroups, groups inside the group. We've got the category of meat, that's the main group, but there are other smaller groups inside this big group. And these are the subgroups. So, in the meat section, we find subgroups of beef, chicken, pork, veal, things like that. We might also find a subgroup of processed meat. Meat which has already been prepared so that it's ready or almost ready to eat or cook and eat. So, we've got the main group, meat, and then we've got all of the subgroups, the smaller groups which fall into the category of meat. We've got a big group and then the smaller groups come under it. They're the subgroups, so they come under the big group. So, back to the newspapers. We can start with the big group, the group which is printed press. Okay, now from there we can find lots of subgroups, can't we? Broadsheet newspapers, daily newspapers which are printed on large, big pieces of paper. These are meant to be the more serious newspapers. Then we have the tabloid, a newspaper which is half the size of the broadsheet and not as serious. Tabloids are meant to be easier to understand, so they have fewer words. But what other subgroups can we have? Well, we could have coloured publications or black and white publications, couldn't we? We could have magazines instead of newspapers. Newspapers are normally printed daily, but magazines are normally weekly or monthly. There are lots of subgroups we could have. We could have a subgroup of fashion magazines, and then inside that subgroup we might find other subgroups. Women's fashion, men's fashion, kids' fashion, dogs' fashion. The list is almost endless. So, back to the newspapers once again. I said that broadsheet newspapers, broadsheets, tend to use more formal language and tabloids. Tabloid newspapers tend to use less formal language. Okay, but because we're using the verb to tend, we know that this is something which doesn't happen all the time, but regularly. So, if we open a tabloid newspaper and see that it's using very formal language, we shouldn't be shocked. Tabloids tend to use informal language, but there's nothing to stop them from printing stories which use formal language. Think about how you go to work. Do you always travel the same way? Probably not 100% of the time. I tend to come to the studio on the tram, but sometimes I walk and sometimes I come in my car, so I can say that I tend to come to work by tram, but we all know that this isn't something that is a guarantee. This isn't something I do 100% of the time. This is something I tend to do. People tend to wear gloves in the winter. Again, it's something we can say, but that doesn't mean that everyone does. Children tend to be taller than their parents. I am taller than my dad and much, much taller than my mum. I think my mum's related to the pygmies, and this is the thing. My sister, who's older than me, is about the same height as my mum, so as we can see, it's not 100%. The weather in Hungary tends to be very hot and dry in the summer, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it rains a lot. All right, it's a date. I'll see you all tomorrow. Same time, same place, but tomorrow, obviously. Okay, and tomorrow we'll have another look at those words which cause what Benza always says they cause. Yes, tomorrow we'll jump back into the maelstrom of chaos, people. So get some sleep. You need to be at the height of your powers to deal with a maelstrom of chaos. All right, I'm off home. Coffee time. And what about you lot? Well, there's the dog, the cat, and the parrot. And then the chores. Whatever you do, remember to have fun doing it. I'll see you all tomorrow. See you later. www.mediaclick.hu. Bye!